According to some reports, players on the Chicago Bears have been openly lobbying for the team to make a deal for Seattle quarterback Russell Wilson. But hang on a second. They have a quarterback in Mitchell Trubisky. The Bears on Wilson's places he would go in a trade, and running back Tariq Cohen took to social media to make his pitch that Trubisky, the former second overall pick, played in 10 games last season, throwing for 2,055 yards with 16 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. The Bears finishing 8-8 last year, way behind the 13-3 Green Bay Packers in that NFC North. They had the 26th ranked offense in the league last year, 11th ranked defense. They put it together late. They won 6 of their last 7 games and lost to the Saints in the playoffs. And for more on that Bears situation this offseason, we now welcome back Jonathan Jones and John Breach. And much like our last discussion about the football team, the Bears have questions at quarterback. And I mean, if your teammates are actively tweeting about trading for another guy at your position, well, that's not really a good sign if you're Mitchell Trubisky. So, JJ, what do the Bears do here?
Well, and the interesting thing about that is Mitch Trubisky is an unrestricted free agent, so at least there's that. I go back to last year with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers where the players on the team didn't necessarily want to say anything about Tom Brady until they got Tom Brady because they didn't want to dismiss Jameis Winston. Well, that message didn't really get to Cordero Patterson and Tariq Cohen. They very much want an upgrade there at the quarterback position, and we, of course, understand why. That offense against the New Orleans Saints in the playoff game was completely inept, and they really were for so much of the season. It is truly a miracle that they made it to the playoffs with the decisions that GM Ryan Pace made, with the head coaching of Matt Nagy. It's truly a wonder in the NFL that they did that. So good for them, but most certainly they need an upgrade at quarterback. Everyone understands that. Whether they actually re-sign Mitch Trubisky or not, I wouldn't do it necessarily, but at least you know who he is. You've danced with him before. You can probably get him for somewhat cheap, and they're up against the cap, and so they're going to have to find a quarterback that fits under their cap.
Yeah, the Bears are an interesting situation because they basically fell backwards into the playoffs. And, maybe if they don't make the postseason after starting 5-1, they fire Matt Nagy. But they didn't. They made the playoffs, and now the ownership group has basically said, look, we're just a quarterback away. We trust Ryan Pace to go get that quarterback. We trust Matt Nagy to coach that quarterback. And guess what just happened? A quarterback fell out of the sky into their lap. You have Russell Wilson's agent saying, hey, I'll be completely open. Russell's completely open going to Chicago. If I am Ryan Pace, I am spending every hour from now until March 17th on the phone with the Seahawks front office saying, I will give up anything you want to acquire Russell Wilson because I have no faith in what Mitchell Trubisky can do. I have seen what Mitchell Trubisky can do, and he just can't get us over the hump. So if I'm the Bears, I'm doing everything I can to trade for Russell Wilson. If for some reason that falls through, I'm calling up Mitchell Trubisky's agent. I'm saying, look, I don't think we want to do a long-term deal. If you're willing to agree to some sort of one-year prove-it contract, we would love to do that. Give us one more season to kind of look at what Trubisky can do. And if he plays well, then we'll think about an extension. If he doesn't play well, then we're going to have to go another route for our quarterback. So, boom. I'm trying to trade for Russell Wilson. If that doesn't work, Trubisky, if he's not willing to take a lower-end deal, then I'm just going off into free agency and attempting to find someone.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, they kind of backed in there, winning 3 of their last 4 games, and then, of course, going down to the Saints. One of the question marks they have is wide receiver Allen Robinson. It's not just the quarterback. It's one of his main targets that he gets to throw to. Not been able to get a deal done with the team, and if he hits the open market, he's going to be gone. There is some thought they could tag him, but that could make things worse, and the expectation is he wouldn't necessarily play under that tag. Breach, if they do tag him, what would they need to do to get him on the field?
Well, if you tag him, Allen Robinson's going to eventually sign it. I mean, he's going to play. I know players do not want to be hit with the franchise tag, but I think the more they think about it, 2021 might be the season where they're okay with it because once these new TV contracts are signed, there's going to be a lot of money out there. The salary cap is going to shoot up over the next few years. And so maybe it's smarter to go out and sign your long-term deal next year. So I think Allen Robinson will get out there. But, if the tag falls through and the Bears just decide to let him walk, then you have another haul. This offense was not high-powered last season. So you have to go out and kind of look around at what you need to do. I don't know that tagging Allen Robinson is the smartest move, though, just because there are so many wide receivers out there in free agency this year. And yes, Robinson already knows your system. He's put up huge numbers with barely adequate quarterback play. So there's a lot to like about him. But I just think they could find someone that's almost as talented at a lot cheaper price if they don't tag him.
I would pay Allen Robinson. I'd pay him right now. I'd take a time machine, hop in the DeLorean. I would have paid him last year. You pay Allen Robinson. You look at his production, and John, you mentioned it, production with the quarterbacks that he's had, not just in Chicago, but let's take it back to Jacksonville. This guy always produces. He is an absolute machine. We don't talk about him as a top 6 or 7 wide receiver in the NFL because he's always normally on losing teams and has not gotten that big contract to sort of vault him into so many of those national headlines, but he's right there. I don't know if I'd make him top 5. That's why I said 6 or 7, but he's right there. And we understand the way the contracts work. So I think that he is deserving of the Michael Thomas deal. I think that he's a more complete wide receiver than Michael Thomas, frankly. And so I would absolutely try to ink him to some sort of 4-year deal that's going to average out $19.5, $20 million per year. You're going to want to get his number low this season so that you don't have to tag him, and that when, as John, you mentioned, the cap starts to go up, that's where the money really starts to come in. That's where those cap charges really start to hit in 2022 and beyond. So I would absolutely do that, especially if you were trying to attract a quarterback to come to Chicago. Apparently Russell Wilson wants to be there. He wants to leave perhaps Pete Carroll for Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace. Good luck to you, buddy. If that's really what you want to do, those guys are going into next season. No one will be on a hotter seat than Pace and Nagy. I don't think that that's a situation you necessarily want to find yourself in if you're a quarterback. But if you do decide that that's where you want to be, this is what you want to do, big city, bright lights, then you got to have a wide receiver, and you need a wide receiver who's going to be happy. And so Allen Robinson, let's be happy. Jimmy Graham, okay, probably cut him, save some money there. You got Darnell Mooney. That'll be okay. But yeah, it's time to pay Allen Robinson. Should have gotten paid last year. Pay him right now.
More complete than Michael Thomas. JJ throwing that down. Nicely done. I mean, you guys said it, both of you. The offense was not that great. And if they lose Robinson, it's not going to help matters. So when you look at the areas of need for this team as they enter into March, JJ, what are the main areas for you?
Well, number 1, it's obviously quarterback. Number 2, it's wide receiver, even outside of Allen Robinson. I'd like to see them add someone else. And then it's offensive line. If they decide that they want to cut Bobby Massey and save some money, they're going to need a tackle. So I'm looking at those areas right there. Also, safety, Eddie Jackson, he's coming off a down year, but he's under contract while everyone else are all pending free agents like Deshaun Gibson and Deion Bush. So you're going to have to look at safety there if you don't bring one of those two guys back. So if I'm looking at it, I'm looking at some free agents to bring in. Obviously, again, at quarterback, is it going to be a Jimmy Garoppolo maybe? Are you going to want to go after a Jameis perhaps? Again, a Teddy Bridgewater. It's just difficult for me to throw a Russell Wilson or a Dak Prescott in there because I just don't think that they're going to become available. I don't believe that Deshaun Watson wants to go to Chicago, and I don't think that Chicago has the capital to even make that trade, even if he did want to go to Chicago. And so then you have to look at guys who are inexpensive at the safety position, a Keanu Neal, a Daniel Sorensen, maybe with that championship pedigree from the Kansas City Chiefs. You want to get a guard or a tackle. DJ Fluker would be a guy who has that sort of position versatility. And so I'm not throwing out a whole bunch of names that everybody knows and probably has all over their fantasy teams, and I get it. I understand those are the realities of Chicago's cap situation, but that's where the holes are that they need to plug moving forward.
Yeah, the Bears absolutely have a lot of holes, and you see Jonathan's list there. At quarterback has got to be at the top of the list. We talk about Russell Wilson, Mitchell Trubisky earlier. If those fall through and they have to go through free agency, I actually like Andy Dalton of all people. It's not just because I'm the ultimate Andy Dalton homer and want to see him win a playoff game at some point in his career. It's because, look, if you're the Bears and you're bringing in a free agent quarterback, you don't want to start from scratch. And Andy Dalton has a lot of history with Bears offensive coordinator Bill Lazor. They were together for 3 years in Cincinnati, so he can come in and doesn't have to start from square one. And so, boom, now you have your quarterback. And then you look at wide receiver. As Jonathan said, even if you tag Allen Robinson, you probably still need a guy. If you let Robinson walk and you have to go after a number 1 wide receiver, I like the idea of the Bears going after a Kenny Golladay or a Chris Godwin. But if you decide to tag Allen Robinson or get an extension done with him, then maybe you go after a guy that won't be as expensive as one of those top-tier receivers, and that could be someone like Will Fuller or Marvin Jones. So I do think they need a few more weapons on offense. One thing I absolutely think the Bears have to do is re-sign Cairo Santos. We don't talk about kickers a lot, but look, the Bears' kicking situation has been an absolute nightmare since they let Robbie Gould walk after the 2015 season. Cairo Santos added some stability to the position last season, which is something Chicago just hasn't had. So they don't have a lot of money. It's not going to be easy. Get him back under contract. And so that one's important. And then maybe get a guy like Russell Okung. They're going to need some help on the offensive line, but they don't have a lot of money to spend. And so that's one of those mid-tier free agents that shouldn't break the bank.
Okay, so Allen Robinson is better than Michael Thomas is what I'm getting from this discussion, and Cairo Santos is a kicker that needs to be re-signed by the Bears. Okay, so let's go about expectations for 2021. From 8-8 to what? JJ, what are your early expectations for the Bears in 2021?
Pain. Difficulty winning football games. Again, like I think that we always put it in the perspective of the division, right? And so Green Bay is not just the class of that division, but of the conference. And so they're not touching Green Bay, and they're not going to for the next couple of years. I look at Minnesota, and Minnesota obviously took a step back, but we've heard from Mike Zimmer, he believed that the defense was going to be a whole lot better than it was going to, even though we all looked at it and said, hold on, these young guys, this isn't going to work. He had too much confidence in himself, a little hubris there, knocked him down to size, and so I think that defense should be better in year two as they congeal. And then obviously the Detroit Lions are going to hit a reset, probably win a couple games that they shouldn't if Jared Goff plays well enough. But I look at the Chicago Bears team, and anytime you go into the season with your coach and general manager on the hot seat, where if you start 1-3, one or both of them will probably be gone by the time you hit mid-October. It's never good. It's not a good situation. And again, they have been incapable of figuring out the quarterback position. It goes back, I talked about hubris, it goes back to 2017 and deciding that, you know what, we don't need to chat with Deshaun Watson. Who really cares? We're going to trade up for Mitch Trubisky, and everything has flowed from there. Mitch Trubisky, he's taken it on the chin. He's handled himself like the consummate professional, despite being the butt of very many jokes, and really, it not being his fault. That's Chicago Bears drafted him at 2 overall in front of Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes. All that said, though, there are any number of issues and decisions that have been made there that are puzzling. They fell into the playoffs. I think John mentioned that probably bad for the franchise now that they're picking in the 20s rather than picking up high and possibly getting their quarterback of the future. I don't know what they're going to do at quarterback. I don't think they're going to get Russell Wilson. And so because of that, 6-10 for the Bears.
Yeah, are these my expectations based on Russell Wilson being on the roster or not on the roster? Because if they have Russell Wilson, I feel like they could compete for the division title. That defense is so good. You throw Russell Wilson in there, all of a sudden they're battling with the Packers for the top spot in NFC North. Now, more realistically, they do not have Russell Wilson, and all of a sudden you're looking at last year's team where you're scratching and clawing to finish 8-8. And so that's really what it comes down to. Can they get competent quarterback play? I'm not sure they can. They haven't been able to the last few years. But the defense is so good. And look, the NFC North, we don't know how good the Vikings are going to be. I don't know in Detroit if biting kneecaps off actually helps you win games. That's yet to be proven. So if you're the Bears, you have to think with this extra playoff spot, if your defense can kind of just will you to another 8-8 record or even 9-7, you at least have an outside shot at the playoffs. So my expectations for the Bears, or if I'm a Bears fan, is that this team could be a wild card contender if they can just get average quarterback play, but there's no guarantee that's going to happen.
Lots of work for the Bears to do. Senior NFL insider Jonathan Jones, CBS Sports NFL writer John Breach. Great stuff, gentlemen. Thanks for popping on with us. The team previews continue here on CBS Sports HQ. What does your team need this offseason? Well, we're all over it on here and on the web. Here are the previews that are coming up for Monday. Talking Colts, Titans, Raiders, and the Rams.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.